Hello, hello. Welcome back. Nicole Holland here with Josh Fonger today. He's a business performance architect and the co-founder of Work the System. He's an international business consultant, coach, and speaker, and he's had the unique experience of personally helping hundreds of businesses grow simply using the WTS method. His specialty is taking stressed out entrepreneurs from working in their business to working on their business using systems so that profit and freedom become a consistent mechanical reality. Super, super excited to have you here today, Josh. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on.
For sure. So tell me, what is Work the System? Let's start out there.
Okay, so Work the System is a method, and I guess for those of you watching the video, it's this book right here. My business partner wrote that book, and it's all about how to take your business and organize it so it can scale.
Brilliant. And speaking of your business partner, that's Sam Carpenter.
hmm
And how is it that you became involved with Sam, and what led you to start the Work the System business?
Well, it's a long story, so I'll try to cut it short. But I was traveling the country doing consulting, trying to help companies grow, and I met Sam. I lived in Bend, Oregon, and so did he. And met over coffee. I read his book, and just kind of curious to meet an entrepreneur. And I was pitching him on a business idea that I had, and he basically told me my idea was crazy and I should just not do it. He's quite a bit older than me, so he was able to give me some sage wisdom about what to do and what not to do, and he's been through the ringer before. And so he and I stayed in touch, and a few months later, the book was already out for a few years. A few months later, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's some companies that really want some help." And he didn't want to do any of the coaching or consulting that came along with this book, and so we forged a partnership. That was about 8 years ago, and then I got on the road and started helping put this method out there and help companies change, and haven't looked back ever since.
Oh, that's very serendipitous.
hmm
Like looking back, is there anything you can share? Like, why do you think Sam chose you? What about your interaction made him think, oh, well, Josh is the guy to contact?
uh, that's a great question. I don't know. I think it was he and I just became good friends right from the get go. I think that was what it is. We both trust each other, and um, he knew that I had a lot of experience in the field. I'd already been flown around to help about 100 companies transform and change. And he knew that he was not going to carry this message. So I think it was more just really just luck, serendipity. And I was ready for a change in what I was doing. And also I realized that the consulting that I was doing, the clients I had were really dependent on me. So I had to fly back there multiple times. And then they would kind of fall back into old habits. And his method really allows transformation to happen, but then for it to stick and then for companies to grow. And that was something I hadn't learned or done before I met him. And so I was pretty excited about this new methodology as well.
Very cool. So I want to get into that, but I have another question I kind of prepared for you,
Mhm.
um, which is, in the intake, I learned that you homeschool and that you
Yeah.
also schedule your personal systems into your life first and then fit your business in second. And I'm curious if you can share both, why is this important to you, why it matters, and also how do you manage that? Because for a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs, especially in the early years, with so many things going on, people find it really challenging to make enough time, if you will,
hmm
to prioritize their personal lives first.
Yeah, well, definitely. Well, it was just a commitment that my wife and I had early on that, we're Christians. We believe that there's a God, and we believe that there is enough time, energy, resources to do what you're supposed to do. And so there's certain things that we know are supposed to do in our lives, right? Part of it has to do with marriage and family and things like that. So we always made sure that those got put in first, and then everything else would be available for work. And so because two of my kids are in the special, or two of my kids are special needs, so that was a high priority. And my wife has had a number of very major health issues. So at one point, she was so ill she couldn't actually get out of bed. She was in so much pain for about 6 months. So it was always, let's make sure that's taken care of first, and business is going to come and go, and we'll be taken care of. And it's always worked. That's always worked for us. And so and it's not for everyone probably, but for us, we just always have done that, and we've always been able to. The company's grown every single year. We've expanded our reach every single year. We've been able to help more companies every single year. So I can't say that it's always been relaxing. It's never been relaxing, but there's always been enough time as long as we put the right things in the right sequence. And I think that's difficult because as an entrepreneur, you can do, there's 1,000 things I could do tomorrow that would help the company, but it's picking the right things and things that will build on top of each other. And as long as you have a clear strategy in place to do that, then you can always build assets that will pay you back over time. But it's I think also part of it's having the long view. A lot of entrepreneurs want to do everything all at once, and you do have to build a business that's going to last. And that you need to be strategic about that. And you also need to make sure you're not putting step 100 ahead of step 1, 2, and 3. And so that was a big part of, I guess, my success with that.
So good. So how do you determine that? Like, how do you get started in figuring out what those things are to put in place and to build around?
Huh? Well, I think each person has to pick their own strategy, business strategy and personal strategy. And for the business strategy, Sam and I, and we've shifted over the years, Sam and I thought that we would just go where the market was. So we put some emails out there to his list, got some clients, and we already had we were doing $500,000 a year first year just with a few emails to his list, people who liked his book. And that was working great. And then we realized that the income was lumpy based on client work because I was working with larger companies. And then we thought, well, maybe we should diversify that with some mid-sized companies, which we did. And then maybe some smaller companies. And now we have, I'm working with hundreds of companies right now, but they are, from startups to large companies. And so in a few weeks, I'll be in London with some larger companies. And then simultaneously, I'm going to do some startups in our membership site. So we've grown from the high revenue sources to the mid, to the low, to the small, based on where companies are at. And I think a lot of times people they don't have a plan in place and they just go everywhere. And I knew there were some certain income requirements that were necessary. And so I started with that in mind, realizing that the business is not me. The business is a kind of a tool or machine to get what I need. And it needs to be what the market needs simultaneously. So it's so kind of a long answer to your question, but I think alignment is what matters ultimately. So what does the market align with what I need? Okay, I'm going to do that first. And consulting with large clients is not as scalable as something that would be, like a $10 a month kind of a service. But that also wouldn't align with my income needs. And so we had to start with where does it align and then work my way towards ultimately the vision we have for the company. And whether it takes 10 years or 10 months, didn't really matter to me. It was about always moving towards that goal.
I'm so appreciating this conversation because what I have seen is that, and what I have fallen into as well when I first started my business online was there's a lot of gurus, self-proclaimed gurus, spouting about, the info product or the courses and how to scale, but they're speaking to an audience that's not ready to scale because they haven't met income goals. They don't even know what their income goals are a lot of times.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I just wonder I think this is something you've seen. And so if there's something you can share about and speak about in terms of how to find that balance and how to really make your strategy scalable long-term, that would be super valuable to us.
Yeah, definitely. So with the small companies, startups that I work with, a couple of times they were venture backed. And so we would try to scale really quickly. But usually my whole idea is scale profitably the whole way through. So if you have a model, make sure it's profitable first, and then make sure it's profitable all the way through. And then it's not so much pressure. And also make sure that the work you're doing is, it's going to be long-term. So I think a lot of times people who, let's just say they do info products or they have a special skill, it's a skill or it's information product that is specific to something that's going to be different in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 years. And so therefore you're building something that actually is a depreciating asset, very quickly depreciating. And I'd always try to push people towards building things that are going to last long term, because if you do that, then the efforts you put in have more time to pay you back. So that was a big part of work the system. Is folks initially were like, oh, how about this and that, and they're focusing on the details. And for Sam and I was always, this method has been around for thousands of years, and we're going to help entrepreneurs make this transition in their business, but we're going to do it in such a way that what we teach and what we do with companies is still going to be relevant in 2 years and 5 years and 10 years, because that hasn't changed. And a lot of times when I'm working with folks, it's not so much on documenting their system so they can scale. It's getting their strategy right, making sure it's profitable, making sure they delegate the first few pieces, and making sure they're personally more productive so that they can move on to ownership level thinking as opposed to technician level thinking. That's an important first piece.
For sure. That's so good. So I imagine, so now how long have you been working with Sam?
About 8 years.
Eight
Yeah.
years.
Mhm.
And so I imagine as well, in addition to tweaking the different levels and the different types of businesses you're working with, I imagine that you have also grown a lot in that time and tweaked your own systems. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious if, is there anything that sort of a pivot point that comes to mind where things really shifted for you after a period of learning?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, there's been lots of twists and turns, and I think this is probably not. Well, probably every guest says the same thing. Is that for Sam and I, our initial concept was let's just buy companies, because we found so many dysfunctional companies, and so we'd find them, and so we never wanted to be like a marketing company or a content generation company. It was just people come to us and let's see if we can buy them. And after several failed attempts at buying them, we'd fix them, get paid, but not actually own them. Um, realized probably should go a different route. And in that time, Sam ran for U.S. Senate. So we pretty much shut down the services, and I was his campaign manager for a Senate run for about 9 months. So we kept the company running, but we focused really on that. And then, primary is a long story. Second place in the primary, didn't go on. And so then it was back to ramping up the business again. And then we got more into coaching. And so our group coaching, we found that that's really the most scalable thing. And so we built all of our systems around what's most scalable, what's most profitable, and what our market likes the most. So we still do high-end services and low-end services, but that's the most scalable for us. And then after that, he ran for governor. And so we kind of took a little pause for a while, helped him out with that. And a number of the employees that work the system ended up moving full-time to work on that campaign, and then Centratel, which is Sam's other business. Meanwhile, I've built a team of my own as Sam's taken part of the team to other places. So we've kind of shifted people around. And I think people need to realize, and our company's going to be more unusual than most, is that the systems have stayed the same. So the systems that Sam's team was using and the systems that my team is now using are the same. We just switched the people. And that's one thing for companies that are growing or when staff is shifting, is that the systems never leave. It's the people that might come or go or shift up or down or sideways. And so investing in those systems is a worthwhile thing to do. And you don't have to perfect them in the beginning. You just have to see them. That's a big part of us. They're already there. You have to see them first. Then you need to optimize them, and then you need to document them. And then after that, you can scale them out. So the larger companies I work with have very advanced documentation software that has automation, that they can do tracking and measurements. And that's great because they've got 500 employees. Whereas with me, a much smaller team, we don't need all of that extra bells and whistles, because the team is nimble and they're professionals at what they do, and we're not outsourcing to 500 people. So we don't have to build that level of structure. So I always want people to know that you don't have to build like some kind of excessive documentation structure if your team doesn't require it. If you just have 2 folks that are outsourced and 1 employee, then build what's going to be the most useful for you and actually pay you back quickly.
Awesome. And when you talk about systems, can you give us some examples of what those systems are that we have to recognize and then optimize and then document and build out? Like,
Sure.
when you talk systems, like I'm a geek and
Huh?
I see systems everywhere, but have found that a lot of people like the word systems, it's kind of like sometimes the word anything that's technical, people go, I don't know what you're talking about. It's just some kind of weird block.
Uh,
Now, no offense if anybody's got that block. I don't mean you're weird. I just find it to be a very strange phenomenon. I know people who will go, "Oh, I don't get that computer stuff. What computer stuff don't you get? I don't get any of it." And it's like,
uh,
"Really? Okay." So, when you say systems, in case anybody is like, "I don't understand systems." Can we talk about what you're talking about?
yeah, it's anything that's repeatable, right? So any repeatable process. So if you're going to hire somebody again and again and again, that would be a system from start to finish. That would be a longer one. So that might include putting the ad out there and reviewing resumes and doing, interviews, and that whole thing is a system within itself. And there's, subsystems which are smaller, which would be just the system of an interview, which would consist of getting the room ready and the questions, and then tracking the questions, and then deciding which candidate. So you can break them up as small or as big as you want to. But I think the first thing is to see that there's a lot of repetition in life. And so if you want something to move towards excellent, first you have to define what excellent is, and then you have to pick apart that particular one and make it really, really good. And I think most people just think they see everything connected as opposed to separating things. So I use this example on a podcast I was on just recently is we've just done this weird thing with our family. Our family's kind of strange. So we wanted our boys, we got 3 boys. We want our boys to interact better with each other. Okay, that's the goal. More peace in the home, become better friends, encourage each other to be on the same side instead of picking at each other. And so there's a new system. When they wake up in the morning, the first thing they do with each other is they give each other a hug and they say a word of encouragement or a blessing with each one of them. And with my wife and I, why not? We can do that. It takes less than 2 minutes, and it's a system that's going to yield a happier home where people are encouraging each other, where they're on each other's side, and a level of love that wouldn't happen if everyone's just kind of doing their own thing. Simple system. And I think, and the way you order lunch, the way you lock your doors at night, the way every single thing is a separate thing that you do over and over again. And what really was a paradigm shifter for me was analyzing Sam's business, because I'd worked with call centers before. He owns an answering service up in Oregon. Is that's a commodity industry. Most companies in that industry are doing 3% net profit. They make money through getting really, really large because there's not much money. Everyone has the same price, and Sam's company is doing 35% net profit. Now, how is that possible when they're in the same industry? And it's because they've taken every single thing that they do and they've decided to make it perfect. And they've dedicated their lives to making every single thing they do perfect over time with systems. And you do that for 10 years and no one can touch you. And your quality is so good that you can charge twice as much for it. And your speed is so fast, you can do it twice as fast as anyone else. And that's the competitive advantage that's sustainable and resilient. And that's something that takes leadership and strategy to get there. And I think most people they don't have the long-term strategy or the leadership or the focus to make that happen. And so therefore they just flounder at pretty good forever until they go out of business.
So good. And I
Yeah.
love that you used the example of your children. I used to be a foster parent and also a correctional officer. And it's like anything, yeah, anything that's repeatable is a system. And I think a lot of times people just don't even realize how simple it really can be, and just not rewriting the plan every single time. How do you get people to shift from, if they are rewriting the plan every time and they're not recognizing those repeatable, those things that they're doing regularly and consistently? Um, how do you help your people recognize them and
Mhm.
then get them into into some kind of, I don't even know your language, how you
Yeah, into a
explain it.
document.
So,
Sure.
yeah,
Uh,
okay, because you said documentations later. So I'm like, oh, okay. So
huh?
can you take us through that process a little
Uh,
bit?
yeah, and it doesn't have to be overly bureaucratic, definitely, especially for small companies. I mean, very simple things. But and it's tedious for a lot of entrepreneurs. But I will actually have them, note what do you do throughout your day. I mean, every 10 minutes, every half hour, what are you doing? And you're going to find out there's a lot of things that you're doing that are over and over and over again. Then you identify which one of those things would you might want to cross train or delegate, and then write a system for that. And ideally, something that you do often. And the more often, the more ROI you're going to get out of that particular thing that you do. For me, I work with a lot of companies that send me their documentation. I review it with them and optimize it. And I used to get their documents, and then I would, save them in the right folder with the right group. It would take about a minute per piece of paper I'd get, per procedure. And it was nothing. But then I thought, well, I'm doing 20 or 30 of these a day, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And I was like, I should probably just have my assistant just put the procedures in the right folders. And I did the math, and I don't remember exactly, but it was like 50 hours a year of my time just putting procedures in folders. Very simple. And so now we have a little system, and she takes it once a day. She does it in a batch. Very simple. And one less thing for me to worry about. And so that's what we do, is make people first write it all down, and then we move that into what we call a procedure project plan, and then we work it through, because in Sam's business they have 400 procedures. That's a lot. That's very overwhelming. And if you prioritize them, you just start with the first one, and you take one and you say, if I get this done, there's going to be a certain ROI, and then that will just roll into the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And what happens for entrepreneurs is they get to then move to higher level thinking and more strategy, because their time is away from the day to day, and it happens over time. And then they can grow the company more. And ultimately, the team will know what to do and how to do it. So it's a commitment. Again, so this is not going to happen in a day, but it starts with one step forward and being consistent with it.
Awesome. I honestly, I don't even know what to ask you. I'm just like, oh, keep talking. So in terms of it's just, again, I'm a bit of a geek. So to me, this is relevant to everybody.
Yeah.
But do you find, when people hire you, obviously they're coming to you recognizing I have a problem and you can help me solve that problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's usually when they come. But usually it's stressed out. That's usually the main thing. It's just high levels of stress, right? And I think that building a business doesn't have to be stressful. It's hard, but it doesn't have to be stressful when you feel like you're in control of the elements. And so, it starts off with a little bit of control, and then as you build it out, you're going to have more and more control over your environment, and therefore more influence. And so that's usually when folks come, and they're just, they tell me their job description is professional firefighter. Right. And we want them to get outside of their day-to-day business, to look down on it objectively, see the elements, and say, okay, actually, my job is not to put fires out. It's to build systems that therefore prevent the fires from happening in the first place. And so we definitely don't focus on results. We focus on the steps that lead to the results. And so it's definitely it's a mind shift. Sam calls it getting it. So we always try to get people to at least see the world differently first. And then once they do, then it's about, where's the biggest pain? Where's the biggest problem? And we'll try to fix that first. And that usually motivates them to move on. And we track a lot of things with the companies, what changes in these entrepreneurs' lives. And the thing that changes first and fastest is not income, but though income will happen, and it's not massive amounts of time, because usually entrepreneurs, there's so many things they have not been doing that when we start saving them time, they just reinvest in the things that they haven't been doing. It's stress. That drops from a 10 or 11, on a scale from 1 to 10. They're usually at a 10 in stress, down to a 7 within a week. And then it's down to more like a 6 or a 5. And then it stays there. 5 is actually pretty good level of stress. And then the time that they get usually follows, and then the money follows. And then, then they can really take that as far as they want. And some folks, they have huge ambitions, right? It's multiple locations, it's multi-million-dollar businesses, and they really want to take it to the max, which is great. Some companies it's to sell, some companies it's to retire, some companies they want to pass it down from mother to daughter, father to son, and then other people it's just they want to get a level of control where they are in control, and they just keep the company at a mid-size, and they just enjoy this. They like to be the celebrity in their business with everything else figured out. And they enjoy just doing their work. So anyone can take it as far as they want to.
So good. So, what do you most enjoy about the work that you do?
Yeah, people would think that maybe I like the documentation part. I'm not a huge fan of that part. Actually, it's a necessary evil. I like to connect with the people I work with, and I like to see their life transformations. That's more what I'm interested in, because these people all have unique giftings and skills, and I like to see that get out there in a bigger way. And then I like them to get their lives back, and that's probably the most interesting. Because I see kind of work as valuable in itself, but usually I work with people with just major health issues or family issues or divorce or just stressed out. And I like to see them really get their lives back and be in control. And as opposed to being out of control. So once they're in control, that's what I love about doing my work, and just helping people get to that level of control, and then staying there and being resilient and being able to help others and have a bigger impact. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me.
Very nice. I like it. So, if my listeners are like, okay, just like I'm like, just keep talking, where can they go to learn more and to engage with you and to see how you might be able to help them?
Sure. Yeah. Well, go to worksystem.com. There you'll get the free copy of the book, my business partner's book. And then we send out resources. We do our own podcast. I do webinars from time to time. And it's a place, it used to just be a place for large companies, and then I'd fly out there and help them. But what we've done is we've transformed it as a place where no matter where you are in the spectrum, you can go and you can systemize your business or optimize it. So we're trying to provide resources to all levels, and then places where they can get help. So whether they want me to fly out there, I can do that. Or if they just want to be a part of our private Facebook group and be a member there and learn from each other and share procedures and share ideas and coordinate, they can hang out there. But no matter where they are, in my opinion, they should get started, because it's not going to just happen by default. This is a new way to work. It's a new way to live. Most people don't do it. Most entrepreneurs don't do it. And so you have to kind of commit to this new way to work. And I think having a community of folks who also work in this peculiar way is helpful to kind of make that transformation, and to know actually maybe someone else is chasing a shiny object, but you're not. You're actually committed to seeing this strategy through, knowing that it's gonna pay off, and then you're gonna have that hockey stick growth that others, they won't. They're just gonna have lumpy. I call it a yo-yo business, where they're just kind of like up and down, and then eventually they just go down. That's most companies. And what we're trying to do is create an environment where that's not the case. You're actually building something to last.
I love it. So good. All right. Before we wrap up, any kind of things you want to, you did just give us a whole bunch of good stuff, but is there any kind of final words of wisdom or something you want, if nothing else, that people take away from today's interview?
Yeah, well, I guess I would just say entrepreneurship doesn't have to be that hard or risky or stressful. I think people get comfortable or used to a certain level of chaos in their life. It doesn't have to be that way, really. You can build it so that it's not that way. And I think most people they get stuck in this grind, in this environment of chaos, and they think that's just the way it's always going to be. And it really doesn't have to be that way. If you see your business differently and you're willing to build the right systems in the right order, you can grow profitably all the way through. And I've seen it done a lot of times. And so maybe you need a paradigm shift. If so, happy to see you over there at workthesystem.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh.
All right. Thank you.